social entrepreneurialism has been growing so much because there's a very good reason for it. It's a basic concept of entrepreneurs using a business model to improve their community, overcome a problem or a situation. And it's something also that's very perfect for many baby boomers because there's a need to be relevant, to do something significant, and also earn an income. Well, we're going to dive into that with someone who I consider to be, well, she enlightened me as to what social entrepreneurialism is, and ProBoomer is a social entrepreneurial enterprise. And she is Bond, Beth Bond, who is herself in Chicago, Illinois, a social entrepreneur. She has spent the last 14 years in tech startups, digital platforms, education programs, community engagement. For instance, one of her endeavors is community startups. Basically works with students to help them develop a marketable idea and use that then to fund their scholarships. So Beth, first of all, how would you define social entrepreneurialism?
Well, social entrepreneurship is much like normal entrepreneurship, but it really has a focus in making an impact, right? So you're solving a problem just like any entrepreneur, but your problem is society-based. So you could see food access as an opportunity to overcome and create some sort of revenue-based model that provides the ability for increased access to food deserts. You could look across every single industry. We've got some crazy problems that exist in our country, across the world, and identifying those problems and coming up with some sort of sustainable revenue-based business model is really the most simplest form of social entrepreneurship.
So that's an interesting point right there too, that you just mentioned. This is using a business model rather than making it a charity, a 501c. And you will have people saying, well, if you're doing something good for the world, it should be a charity. You should be doing it for free. Why does this, in many cases, and this is in no way, shape, or form to diminish pure charities, but what is the argument for making it a business model rather than a charity model?
Yeah, well, I think, 501c3s, 501c X are really great because they really are about making a difference. But what we've seen is that 501c3s are really, really burdened by a lot of the red tape, a lot of the IRS mandates for board recording and the papers that you have to file and the kind of things that you have to keep up with. So you're a little bit stalling the kind of sustainable impact that you have. It's not as fun as an organization to be, asking people for money rather than offering them a value proposition for something that you're making the case that they need to have, instead of it will feel really nice in your heart to contribute to our organization. The nonprofit model arguably is going to face the biggest hurdle, because right now, when everybody has kind of limited income, limited cash reserves or free cash available, social programs are really going to have to figure out sustainable revenue channels. And social enterprise is a really great way to do that.
Yeah, and 2 points to support in that. I mean, number one, you do hear about some of these major charities where you hear the stunning number that like 80 cents on the dollar, to be approximate, goes to operations. That means only a few pennies actually goes to the endeavor. And the reason why is because so much fundraising plus all the red tape and due diligence that they have to do. The second thing is when I was thinking about starting a ProBoomer, I was doing some work with quite a large group of very successful entrepreneurs. And when I would approach them with my idea, the first question out of their mouth would be, is this a charity or is this an enterprise? And I would ask why, and they'd say, because an enterprise tends to be more nimble and quite frankly can be much more successful faster. And that's aligns with what you're saying, right?
Yeah, and I think, there's a really great TED Talk that Dan Pallotta gave, I think it was in 2014, but the title is "The Way We Think About Nonprofit in America is Dead Wrong." And he goes all the way back to, the founding of Americas and the ideas that Puritans put in place to create the nonprofit structure. So they were very capitalist, we're a very capitalist people, and nonprofit 501c3 charities were created to atone for their sin of capitalism. And so this idea that money or capital cannot be attached goes way back to kind of the fundamental forming from Puritans. And so I think it's well time that we should reevaluate that stance. Doing well and doing good are both very possible. There are some thriving business models that are social enterprises that do a great amount of good in the world while they still pay their shareholders back a good return.
A very good point. And also too, yeah, a lot of us have to earn a living. I mean, so many boomers do not have any or very little retirement savings. And so you've got to earn an income. And I had somebody approach me, and I was the last of 10,000, where somebody said, well, if it's really a noble cause, you should be doing this for free. And I'm like, well, do you work for free? I mean, I still have to keep the lights on. I have to fund this, you have to fund the enterprise.
Yeah, what's really wonderful is, going back to that old world thinking, I think the new world that is coming up, my generation, the generations now, Generation Z, they are all very social enterprise based in thinking. So it's not about the revenue model first and foremost anymore. I think what the boomers could really do for this younger generation that's starting up is really show them the value of currency, financial currency. It's got this really dark tinge to it. It's kind of the bad word in the room when you've got a bunch of young startup ideators talking about how they could make an impact. The first person to say, well, how does this make money? People kind of give the side eye to. But I think that there's a really beautiful mix that can occur, and certainly intergenerational ideation really can overcome some of those initial barriers to people who want to make an impact, but maybe it won't be super sustainable like the 501c3 model generally is.
Yeah, you touched on something that I'm going to jump on, and we will be going through this with some very practical perspective. Who the heck am I to do this? Are you talking about something major, so can it be something simple? And some examples. But the intergenerational part of it, which there's a lot of emphasis, certainly on ProBoomer. I've been putting a lot up there because so many enterprises want that dynamic, but it's a challenge. And quite frankly, I even put forth that a lot of the onus is on boomers to be up to date, because it's not just a millennial way, it's a new business way. Well, what about that?
Sure.
What about that intergenerational dynamic that if I'm starting up a business, by the way, which is the case with ProBoomer, and I have millennials doing work with me on it, or the flip side of it, younger generations, whether Gen Z, Gen X, or millennials, bringing in boomers. So maybe you want to be involved in a social enterprise. You don't want to start it up yourself, but you can bring that expertise, wisdom, as well as talent and skill to the party.
Yeah, I love in Cook County here in Chicago, and I apologize, I've got little ones maybe screaming in the background.
I remember.
Here in Cook County, there was a commission that was created a few years back called the Social Innovation Commission, or the Commission on Social Innovation. And what they did, which I thought was really brilliant, was they bucketed their different working groups into different forms of capital. So there's a financial capital working group, there's a human capital working group, a social capital working group, and an intellectual capital working group. And what I think is so important about these different kinds of capital that we can contribute is for people to unpack where their capital or their ability to generate that capital really exists. And so certainly boomers have a huge appreciation for financial capital. The capitalist market that so many younger people really don't understand, they don't see the need for because it's not working for everyone. That's a perspective that's so valuable. The social capital perspective that students or young people have because they're digital natives, and now social capital comes from those digital channels. There's so many things. Everybody, I think, is blessed with intellectual capital. We can all come up with ideas, but it's really all about putting that human capital together so that we can unpack all of the nuances that exist within a new enterprise. So I would encourage boomers who maybe are really reluctant to kind of incorporate their own entity to dig into their local startup scene. There's always going to be an SBA hub for a small business administration hub for entrepreneurs, young, old, aged, whatever, and dig into what are people doing and what is really interesting to you. You know, what is the superpower? What is your superhero story? You know, we all have this origin story where our DNA has been changed by different societal effects, right? Like we've lived experiences that have changed who we are. And certainly those experiences can ignite some sort of passion in us for a specific topic. You know, I am a survivor of pediatric cancer. And so when I think about all of the barriers that exist for human connection in that world, it can inform and kind of sustain my motivation to really make an impact in that vertical. I think boomers who have reticence should really unpack what do they give a shit about, and then go find somebody who might be doing something that aligns with that and say, hey, I have a few things that either some questions for you. I'm really interested in what you're doing. Kind of sell the experience that you have as something that's so valuable that this organization wants to say, hey, could we give you a call back next week? Could you maybe be an advisor to us? You know, like, the one thing that young people don't see their value is in like just worth by showing up. You know, boomers have a lived experience that is informed by, you know, however many decades and recessions and new agile ways of being, because they've seen industry go through so many flux and change. And so that just in and of itself is a value to younger organizations or younger founders that don't have that kind of enriched experience of the world. And so kind of aligning maybe as like a dip your foot into the pool step could be just find an org and ask a few questions of them. See if they're thinking through everything that maybe you could find a few gaps to fill for them.
You know, I love this because in the first place, this has been a success factor for me. You know, in my content creation business, when I would take on something that no one had done before, or I had never done before, and it's like, what am I good at? What am I not? What do I know about? What do I don't? And fill those gaps. And I've applied that, and I think so many, it works both ways. If you are a millennial or a Gen Zer with a startup, you're going to have gaps that a given boomer, by virtue of their experience and knowledge or their specific talent and ability that you don't lose just because you got older, can fill those gaps. Same thing around. You're that boomer that's got a startup enterprise, and like you just said, the social channels, you know, express what your intent and your need is, and then bring in the digital, because boomers are the digital or the digital creators, but bring in the digital native to handle that for you. And so that intergenerational aspect, no matter who's starting up the enterprise, is a beautiful thing. It's a beautiful thing that needs to be done more of.
I totally agree. The more perspective, the better. Yep.
So
agree.
Let's so I want to get back to the nuts and bolts thing, because there was one thing when we were talking about the taxes and a 501c versus an enterprise, and that's also there is the L3C out there, which is kind of the unique hybrid possibility for you I know more about it than I do, so I'll let you explain.
Yeah, it's actually quite a new structure. So I think it's only live in about 17 states. It might be more since I last looked. But it's just an extra L on LLC. So you've got low profit, limited liability corporation. And what that means is because you're impact or impact based or social mission driven, your revenue is taxed at a lower percentage. So kind of a win right up front. A lot of these organizations also can apply for different tax incentives. So the state of Illinois, for example, has the angel tax credit, where if you are a qualified new business venture, usually doing something in some innovative new approach, you can apply to be a qualified new business venture. And once you receive that designation, you actually give any investors a 25% return of their total investment back in the form of a tax credit, which is huge. It can be carried over for 5 years if you don't use it that first year. But there are such great incentives that are really helping social entrepreneurs. And, even if you are putting in $10,000 of your own money, how about a great $2,500 kickback in that first year, just for starting that enterprise? So
a legal
kickback.
kickback.
Yeah, a kickback, right? No funny math here. It's all above board. So yeah, I think L3Cs, very interesting. I don't know. I think most people still do the Delaware C Corp or Delaware S Corp for their, because Facebook made that so popular, the social network, everybody saw it. And for some reason, everybody loves that structure. But if you really look into the incentives that exist for your state, more than likely, there will be some incentive structure for you coming up with an LLC that's locally incorporated. And then, of course, L3C can be something you augment.
Now, there's a quote that I love because I bristled at it the first time I heard it, but then I got to thinking about it and I thought how true it might be. And that is,
I love that.
Entrepreneurs will cure the ills of the world. Now, or will solve the problems of the world or whatever. And actually a thought that I had is, do you want to count on government to do it for you? But there is a positive intention behind that, because as we've been talking about, the business model can sometimes be more nimble and can be actually more successful. And, since you've been in the space a lot, bottom line, have you seen a lot of impact through social entrepreneurial endeavors?
Yeah, I think when you unpack, what is a social enterprise, or what is one that we can identify. So one of the first and most popular ones is Tom Shoes, right? Tom Shoes is a shoe company. They make shoes. What they did, which was innovative and social impact based, was a buy one, get or give one model. So if I buy Tom Shoes, which probably cost them maybe, $3 per pair, at $45 or whatever their base price is, they give a pair to a child in some village community that does not have access to footwear. So that is a form of social entrepreneurship. It's a buy one, give one model, right? They're a subscription-based social enterprise where I can buy a co-op food basket that comes to me every month. And all of the produce that I receive is grown locally and is booming the local economy. There's a really, really great social enterprise here in Chicago called My Block, My Hood, My City. Everybody thinks they are a nonprofit organization. Their mission is to take students out of the south side of Chicago who have never seen the skyline, although they live 15 miles from it, downtown, and visit a trading firm and visit a digital marketing firm and just expand their horizon for what is possible in the world for them. And they fund their entire operation simply by selling hoodies. They have a product. It's very beautifully branded, My Block, My Hood, My City.
Talk about your current one, which is in the fundamental thing, this thing about, in enabling young students to have these great ideas, connecting them with mentors and tech hubs and city resources to turn it into something, but then also now how you are adjusting given this pandemic. So give us an insight into that.
Yeah. So one of the organizations that I started about 5 years ago was an organization that taught social entrepreneurship in public schools. So working with students who come from the south and west sides of Chicago, completely, disinvested communities who experience high amounts of trauma. Some of the best people to solve problems are the ones that have the most intimate experiences of them. And so students would always come up with, what are the problems that we experience? We have a 10-week course where first they do ideation and kind of narrowing down what are the top things that we think affect our city or our neighborhood. And then over the next 8 weeks, they work in teams to come up with some sort of business model to make an impact in that problem. And invariably, these ideas are so good. One of them is around, I guess I'll use a consumer product, because digital platforms, there's so many of them. There's so many apps out there. But there's this one student group, fifth graders, if you can believe it, who said, people can't focus. And I said, what? No. I said, that's a huge problem that a lot of people, we could do use case documentation for weeks. But why can't people focus? We have to really break down kind of what are the key problems that exist to create kind of this cascading problem. And so, in fact, the fun thing for me is I get to research and learn alongside them. But the 3 reasons people can't focus, can you guess one of them?
Noise. I mean, noise from social media and things of that sort.
So one of the reasons is the technology that we use is emitting blue light into our eyes.
Oh,
through
right.
cell phones,
Yes.
through screens, through laptops, everything. Right? So we're seeing blue light all day. What blue light actually does in your body chemically is reduce the amount of melatonin that you're producing. So you have a much harder time falling asleep and staying asleep at night. The 2 other ways are through sugar intake. There's sugar in everything. People aren't drinking as much water to clear their body out as they need to. And the 3rd was really interesting. It was breathing. We all breathe very defensively into our upper body because we think, oh, that's where our lungs are. That's super normal. But if you go to yoga or you have practiced as a yogi, you know that when you are at your most relaxed, calm, focused state, you're breathing right into your bottom belly, right?
Your diaphragm.
Right into your diaphragm. And what that does, biochemically is it triggers the vagus nerve chain, which runs from the base of your skull right down your spinal column through every nerve center of your body. And when you breathe low and slow, it is actually reducing your heart rate, it's calming your blood pressure, it's doing all of these things that can help with chronic illness that people experience. And so these 5th graders said, okay, how can we combine all of these 3 things? Blue light, getting them full color spectrum, encouraging people to drink more water, and breathing correctly. And what we came up with was a little device that you can wrap around a water bottle. It's not another water bottle. We don't need another one of those, but it's a little LED enabled breathing tool. So when you click on this little sleeve, it lights up green or purple or yellow, but when it's lit on that color, it pulses up to bright and then back down to fade as slow as you're supposed to breathe optimally. And what we found as we started presenting this product is there are certain communities that learn to regulate their emotion through light and color therapy. So people with sensory processing differences, autism, even people in the yogi community. This is a medical device that people can use in order to regulate their emotions and then become more focused. And so it's these tiny little workshops where you just have people throwing random weird ideas out. We like to call like the idea storm phase, the land of crappy ideas, where it's just like, let them all out, put 100 ideas.
There is no bad idea. There is no bad idea.
There is no bad idea. There are just ideas that don't get brought to market, right? So, so it's so much fun. Some are a little bit more meaty, mental health, access, gun violence. Students, we think that adults experience or have experience of the trauma of this world, and more we find that it's 1 in 5 people experience their first traumatic event before the age of 5. And that really triggers so many things to occur later in life. And so just teaching students this kind of design process way of thinking, looking through, forming empathy. Oxytocin and empathy is the initial stage that we should all be counting on for ideation. Then go into a little bit of research so that you fully understand where gaps exist. Then go into ideating, then go into a collaboration where you're sharing out and refining that idea, test it, And then, yeah, so it's so much fun. We've got a few ideas that we're actually bringing to market to generate revenue, and it's growing in popularity. I think a lot of people are really digging into social entrepreneurship and how they can apply it to their programming with you.
You know, and the baseline of what you were sharing, in terms of, you know, people might be like, well, this sounds interesting, but how do I come up with the big idea? And I know it's here. So I'm a big fan of the great disruptor, Jay Samit. And his method is, he says, you know, for the next 30 days, have a pen and paper next to your bed or next to your toothbrush, and every day write down 3 problems that you saw, encountered, or thought about. And
Love it.
yeah, and then what happens is that, and now I'm kind of adding on to it, is that as you start, you're starting the gears turning, and something is going to kind of come up again and again and again, and something's going to click in your brain in terms of solution, which is what you've enabled these students to do. They've recognized all these problems, something clicks in them and turns into an idea. And so it's brilliant in manifesting it. But the manifesting thing is kind of the next question, and that is the imposter syndrome. Who the hell am I to start up a business? I'm not Steve Jobs, you know, I'm not Beth Bond. I mean, what's your counterpoint to that?
Oh my gosh. I mean, I think that goes back to kind of like fundamental value of self, which is really hard for people. You know, there are a lot of systems that have conditioned us to feel like, you know, we are not the savior. We are not that voice in the sky who is the sole source of all inspiration. It's like, I think the narrative shift that's really important is to understand, like, each of us are uniquely gifted and divine manifestations of that, whatever you call that to be. And who the hell are you to waste the lived experience that you have in this world and not use it for the benefit of others and yourself? You know, like, if you're solving your own problem, the second step is talking to other people and validating that they have that problem too. So I think the imposter syndrome, while, you know, it's something that I'm not sure will ever be erased. I think some people suffer from it much more than others. But the way that I overcome that is in talking to other people and validating the beliefs that I have, so that I can say, this isn't, sometimes problems don't need to be solved, right? Sometimes you have a problem in your life, and the solution that you come up with is something that people won't implement because they don't really care about the problem that much, right? Some of us are okay with certain problems that exist. But when we start talking to each other and we find those kind of Venn diagram little sections where it's like, yes, I also have this problem, and yes, I would love to solve it. This is what I currently do to solve it, and this is why it doesn't really work all the way. That is the apex for where ideation should start.
Oh, that's brilliant. And by the way, too, if you were able to poll some of the great people throughout history, or even if they're unknown, who started a business or who solved a problem, I would think 95% of them would say,
yeah,
who the hell was I to do that? I still can't believe this happened to me.
Join the club. Who cares? We're always going to doubt ourselves. It's a great group of people. At the end of the day, just, you know, get outside your own head. Imposter syndrome occurs when we feel heavy isolation. And the best antidote to isolation is to pick up a phone, pick up your social media, and just start, you know, connecting.
Yeah, the difference between those who did and those who didn't is that those who did. That's my attempt at a Bartlett's quotation. Okay.
I love it.
So going back to what you just said, it really goes in with support. So the beauty of it is that, you know, anything that we're trying to overcome or anything that we're trying to achieve, somebody else has already done it. And the beauty in what I've learned from you, and I know exists in Chicago, but quite frankly, it exists all over the country, even in rural areas, through counties or through the state, or business groups or whatever, is all of this support that's both formal and informal. So let's say I have that idea and I don't even know where to start. I mean, give me some sense of what's fundamentally out there, and that with a little bit of Google searching and networking, meaning calling somebody up and saying, what would you do? Who should I talk to? What, give me some perspective on that.
Yeah, in this digital age, LinkedIn is one of the best tools that you can use to just get somebody's ear or inbox for 15 minutes. I think the beautiful thing about entrepreneurs is they love talking about problems. They love talking about ideas. And invariably, no matter who you are, if you sent something to my inbox and said, hey, could I get your eyes on this? Could I get a little bit of brain trust here to figure out, like, am I going down the wrong path? You will get the biggest response when you're asking very pointed asks. So it's not, hey, do you have 15 minutes to hop on a call? It's, give me 3 sentences and ask me, do you know anybody working on this? Or do you see any barriers that exist to this idea that I'm working on? Get pointed questions to the people who will give you pointed answers that are relevant to help. And so LinkedIn is a really great vehicle for that. Again, like here in Chicago, we're really blessed to have a very active startup ecosystem where we can plug into 1871 or TechNexus or Matter if it's a healthcare one, mHub if it's a manufacturing product. There's so many resources, but I'd just say your local SBA might be a really great place to start. Give them a call right now. They're a little inundated with PPP, which is a whole nother issue. But yeah, just go on LinkedIn, start making connections. If you are not audacious enough to ask 5 people that you don't know, what do you think about this thing? Then do you have the wherewithal to run a business?
Right. Well, and a couple of points to add to that. I mean, number one, another source is just economic business development groups. Every region, every area has them, and they usually have coffees and meetups, and they're mandated to listen to you. And the other thing too is that you get this great idea, and it's like raising a child. Nothing happens that you think will happen. It's a constant change and pivoting of it. I mean,
you learn everything you don't know.
Oh yeah, big time. And what I was thinking a month ago, I'm already thinking differently. But it really is the process and the journey of it that, quite frankly, makes it very stimulating and exciting. And the other thing, here's the question, but I got to give it a setup. The question that I'm going to add with you or ask you is fundamentally, make your impassioned case to me to consider being a social entrepreneur. But I also want to say that in that journey, and with Beth, when I first met Beth, she actually, thinking of one of our favorite spy masters of all time, said that her name was Bond, Beth Bond. And I've also looked at being an entrepreneur and what I'm doing with ProBoomer. I've called it for years the James Bond method, where what did he always do? It'd be kind of a little bit of a plan, and look, at worst case scenario, I get caught, but I get in and I'll figure it out as I go along.
Sure.
And I think there's some value to that.
Yeah, certainly. I mean, you will never know until you do. The best way to do something is do it. And, even when you can chart out a roadmap, who was it? I think it was Euclid. The movie Lincoln with Daniel Day-Lewis, who played Lincoln. There were so many really great quotes in that movie, but he was talking about, one of the philosophers talking about, you can chart your North Star, but it will never account for all of the pits and valleys and lagoons and, twisted roads that you will confront along the way. And an entrepreneur is just somebody who is okay with that. You're learning as you go. You're building the train, or you're building the tracks as the train drives down. So I think that's fun. I think it's all a part of the frame of mind that you can train yourself to have. Some people are better equipped to be okay with that risky unknown than others, but yeah, it's a thrilling experience is what you should wake up and look in the mirror and say every day versus, oh shit, what am I doing?
Yeah, yeah. Or some people who don't even bother getting out of bed, which is an issue with a lot of people who follow traditional retirement. They lose a reason to get out of bed in the morning because they're not significant anymore. But what what um, what are you getting out of it, and what do you hope is your legacy from taking this path of life?
Hmm. Interesting. I'm somebody who loves to build the tracks and doesn't really think about where they're going necessarily. I count on
I
other
like
people
that.
for that.
I like that. I like that.
I'm a great track builder in terms of like where the station is supposed to be so that it has the most people on it. That's where I love working with other people so that I don't get that imposter syndrome. Um, Gosh, a legacy would be, I focus mostly in youth, empowering youth and I guess people at large to really understand the power that they have in this world to create, solve, to collaborate. We are not, one person will not be the person to do it all. And realizing that is a really great first step to understanding what are your strengths and what do you contribute to the equation. Is it financial capital? Is it intellectual capital? Is it social? Is it human? Is it goods? There's so many ways to contribute, and really making sure people understand what is their favorite part of that, not just what are they uniquely qualified or called to do. There's a great quote that says, life doesn't call the qualified, it qualifies the called. I
Yes,
love that.
I
It's
do
such a
too.
powerful quote
I do too.
because it really just shows us like, who cares? Who cares where you went to school or if you went to school at all? You are here to do something, and let's just get over the whole like self-pity thing and do it with one another. And so I think for me, youth is where I focus a lot of my time into. If I can make sure that there's a very easy process and kind of templated way for students to go through ideation and really change the narrative around problems that exist in their lives as opportunities for them to be the solution. That's I guess that's like the really naive hippie way to be like, I just want to make an impact. But yeah, I think
But
there's a certain,
you get jazzed by that though. I mean, you get a buzz from that, right?
yeah, for sure. Yeah, I think, some people get, we all get our energy from different spaces. Mine is definitely in interaction and with connecting with the source for ideation. Those are the ways that really, really ignite me. And just leaning into them is what I think will give me kind of the antidote to the imposter syndrome that you bring up.
Yeah, and you brought up a point a moment ago that does answer that imposter syndrome thing. That's brilliant. If you look through human mythology, so all the different civilizations and such, the heroes all had problems and shortcomings. In fact, I heard somebody characterize, if you look at almost all the key characters in the Bible, um, almost every single one of them, Moses stuttered, or whatever, that that tells us a story about, no matter what it is, we have more in us than the outward appearance or assumptions would
Sure.
seem to matter.
Yeah. Yeah. We're fallible, so who cares at
Yeah.
the end of the day?
And you
Is my
reach this point in
expectation?
life and you're like, to hell with it, man. It's now or never. I'm going
Yeah.
for it. Yeah.
That's what I really,
Really.
boomers are so, they're situated in this, if they have the courage and the wherewithal to, and they do already. I mean, look at how many storms boomers have weathered. I just think because of the enriched experience of this world, boomers are so uniquely positioned to bring so much value to a lot of the startups, a lot of the companies that exist today that are all facing the hard truth of you have to weather this downturn. And people who can bring a certain amount of safety or security to that conversation, like, this is not the first time this has happened, and this is how markets bounce back. It's so valuable to people who are just, clamoring to any last kind of last resort that may not be taking into account like longevity. Everybody's looking at 6 months, you know, even huge Fortune 100 companies whose model completely upended by this pandemic are looking at 6 months, 18 months. And it's like, okay, great. What are the guiding visions that should lead us into 5 years from now, 10 years from now? And so that's what boomers really have been qualified to do by their lived experience. And I'm really excited to see much more intergenerational collaboration. You know, my generation can think that we know everything all day long, but certainly that is not the case. And yeah, just, man, I own that power. There's so much power there.
Oh, I love that. Yes, you know, and by the way, when we were your age, we thought we knew everything too. And some of us still think we know everything.
Until you did that stupid thing that taught you, oh, I have much more to learn. And we're all going to do that. Leading each other through it is the real goal.
Amen. Beth, thank you so much. I look forward to the next interview with you.
Oh, this has been so much. I thank you so much for your consistency. People, look at Paul's consistency. Consistency and content. It's what Gary Vee talks about all the time. I love it. Thank you so much. Let me know how I can help anybody watching. Look through my LinkedIn connections. Who can I connect you to? How can I help you? Tell me your idea. I'd love to contribute what I can.
And by the way, in the notes and show notes are contact information for Beth and the TED Talk that she talked about earlier.
Yes.
Beth, take care. Be calm. Stay strong.
Yes. Have a great one.